Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Pallavi Manchanda and with me is Reshma Tiwari, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. First, the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on a two-nation tour to Germany and UAE tomorrow. Mr. Modi says he is looking forward to meet leaders of some of the participating G7 and guest countries. US President Joe Biden signs the breakthrough gun safety legislation. India dispatches next shipment of 3,000 metric tons of wheat to Afghanistan today. In archery, Indian duo of Jyoti Surekha and Abhishek Verma win gold in World Cup Stage 3 mixed team event in Paris. And in women's cricket, India wins T20 series against Sri Lanka 2-0 in the three-match series, beat Sri Lanka by 5 wickets in the second T20 international at Dambulla. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be on a 3-day visit to Germany and UAE beginning tomorrow. Mr. Modi will visit Schloss Elmau for the G7 summit under the German presidency on 26th and 27th of this month. The Group of 7, G7, is an informal group of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom and United States. The invitation to the G7 summit is in keeping with the tradition of strong and close partnership and high-level political contacts between India and Germany. During the visit, the Prime Minister will also hold bilateral meetings with the leaders of G7 and guest countries on the sidelines of the summit. Briefing media in New Delhi, Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra said, besides India, Germany has also invited Argentina, Indonesia, Senegal and South Africa to the summit. Mr. Kwatra said the Prime Minister is scheduled to participate in 2 sessions at the G7 summit on Monday. The first session relates to climate, energy and health, and the second session is on food security and gender equality. Mr. Modi is scheduled to have interaction with the Indian diaspora at a community level in Germany.
India's regular participation at the G7 summit clearly points to increasing acceptance and recognition that India needs to be a part of any and every sustained effort to find solution to solve the challenges, global challenges in particular, which are being faced by the world.
After attending the G7 summit, Prime Minister Modi will be travelling to United Arab Emirates on the 28th of this month to pay his personal condolences on the passing away of former UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. He will also take the opportunity to congratulate Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan on his election as the new President of UAE and ruler of Abu Dhabi. The Prime Minister will depart from UAE the same night.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on G7 Summit and India. In conversation are Shilkant Sharma, former diplomat, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, journalist.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is due to leave for Germany after midnight tonight to participate in the outreach sessions of the G7 summit. Germany, as the current chair of the G7, is hosting the summit at the Schloss Elmau Castle in Bavaria in southern Germany on the 27th and 28th of this month. The G7 comprises the world's oldest 7 largest economies: the United States, Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, and the United Kingdom. Besides India, Germany has also invited Argentina, Indonesia, Senegal, and South Africa this year as guests for the summit to recognize these democracies of the Global South as its partners. During his 2-day summit, Prime Minister, apart from attending the summit deliberations, will be holding bilateral meetings and discussions with leaders not only of the G7 countries but also the guest countries on the sidelines of this summit. Ambassador Shilkant Sharma, Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra said yesterday that India's regular participation at the G7 summits clearly reflects that the West needs its support to confront major challenges facing the globe. So what are some of these major challenges that are facing us at the moment?
Nilova, the major challenge today is energy costs food costs and the fear of famine, and all the climate change impact. And the internal tensions between meeting demands in these three areas and how they come into conflict with each other, for instance. And then, of course, the other element which is G7 summit focusing is on the Ukraine crisis and the Russian aggression there. Now, India has been a constructive player in all these areas. For instance, in energy field, India has been working assiduously to move in the renewable energy and to increase its production of renewable energy and the share of renewable energy in its energy mix, which goes to help the climate change requirements, how to cope with the climate change dangers. Then about food, India has been supplying grain to a lot of southern countries, and it has already been a grain exporter, but India has decided that it will not export in a free fashion, but from government to government way. So that is another area that India has been contributing. Then India's own size, look at G7, they have total population is something like 770 million. And India alone is 1.3 billion people. And these 1.3 billion people are steering themselves in a democratic fashion, in a pluralistic society, in a law-abiding manner, and peaceful transition of power and democratic politics. All these are virtues which are not easily available in the world today. So this has India's inherent importance, and the G7 recognize this. Then besides that, for the Indo-Pacific area, the Americans have felt that India is a very vital partner because of the maritime security and the whole requirement of resilience of supply chains and diversification of supply chains. And also in the new globalization where they want to work with countries which respect rule of law, countries which sustain each other with equality of interest. So in all these areas, India has a major role. So that's why even the US Defense Department has come out saying that India is an important partner. And this is because of where India stands. As our External Affairs Minister said last week or a few days back, that India stands on its own and India is a pole itself because of such a large size and its own policies and its practices. So all these things put together make us a worthwhile partner for G7.
These are the world's most industrialized 7 countries, and they're amongst the wealthiest and so on. But in a way of speaking, isn't China also an elephant in the room? Because given the size of China's economy, for it not to be present in these kinds of deliberations, is that a clear signal being sent out to China that the West sort of disapproves of its behavior, particularly vis-a-vis the way it disrespects international law, whether it's in the South China Sea or even along the borders of India, the sort of aggressiveness, the fact that they've endorsed Russia in this war against Ukraine. Is this a clear signal to China of disapproval from the G7?
Well, with China, the whole investment of G7 in China ever since the mid-1980s has been that by letting it open and letting China mainstream with the world trading system and world economy and gradual integration of China, they will also move in the direction of the democratic freedoms and by a law-abiding country. But China has belied these expectations because having achieved remarkable, extraordinary growth and wealth, they now flout these rules and they have started dovetailing everything to their own strategic interests. Now, which is what roils the G7 countries. And China's joining hands with Russia in its aggression with Ukraine and February 4 joint statement between China and Russia has actually worked to unify the entire NATO and US and the OECD countries. China made a mistake. China thought that these countries were splintered, they were not together. But there's a new strength in G7. And as Germany has said, among the things which they want the G7 to decide would be a Marshall Plan for reconstruction of Ukraine. Now, this is a kind of a cohesion which the wrong and misguided policies of China and its assertiveness and its aggression has brought about in its Western counterparts. Just a few years back, welcoming China with outstretched hands. So now this is the reason why the Chinese economy, no matter what its size is, is not being welcomed in this grouping.
This time the G7 summit has chosen these 5 key priority areas. And one of them is the promotion of shared values of democracy, which is, of course, where China totally loses out. The others are, things like energy transition, as you rightly said, economic recovery and transformation. Pandemic prevention and control is the other very interesting thing that they're all going to be discussing. And, of course, sustainable investments in infrastructure. So at least on 3 of those 5 counts, China loses out. And India, as you rightly said, and as the Foreign Secretary said, India is making itself increasingly indispensable.
Yes, India has been acceptable to most of these countries because India plays by the rules. It is not domineering. India doesn't dictate terms. And India is willing to explain itself through extensive outreach, not only bilaterally but multilaterally in various forums, in the UN, in the G7, in the G20, and also in fora where China and Russia are participating like BRICS Summit. So India is open about it. These are the tributes that Indian policy, which makes it very compatible with the goals which G7 wants to achieve. On pandemic, for instance, India has been very outgoing about the vaccine. And, vaccine Maitri has been a very successful diplomatic venture for India. And India has been coping with the problem of the COVID variants infecting the country in successive ways, but very effectively. And as Prime Minister Modi said in the BRICS Summit, that even after 2 years, we are still coping with it, but we are coping it with successfully in a large measure. These are strengths. Then you mentioned about energy transition, which I feel that India is very committed to. And about sustainability, again, the policies which have been pursued by the government in Delhi have been in the favor of sustainable development, and in the sustainable development goals, our success has been, given our size and giving our challenges that we face, by a great measure, it is significant success, though we are still at work. And about poverty alleviation, for instance, which is a major plank, about electricity generation, for instance, the way we have gone about now electrifying the whole country. This is unprecedented in the world, that a country of 1.3 billion now claims that this entire villages, all the way up to the rural areas, we have electrified. And though there are gaps and all that, but we are pushing it. So these are the indications of an India on the move. And India, as it grapples with its own problems, there is an inherent strength which comes to the country and its economy. And that strength is actually, as the Americans say, a stable and strong India is good for the world.
The other thing is that Prime Minister is going to be taking part in 2 sessions with the other partner countries. One of these relates to climate, energy and health, which we have largely spoken about. The second session is going to be on food security and gender equality. Now, the food security aspect, how the summiteers presumably will talk about how to keep the food supply chains and all of the supply chains going, and how to overcome the shortages that have been created by the war in Ukraine. So in this sphere, what do you think that the G7 partners are going to be asking India to help with particularly?
I think they would like to tap India's fruit grain export. And now India's position has been that it will be willing to work on government-to-government basis. I suppose, and even the UN agencies which are involved, like UN Food Program or IFED or other international organizations which are actually lined up by the G7, I think India's interaction with these UN bodies also is good. So it depends how they approach. But I think our policies are open about working out with governments and I suppose international organizations also in this context. This whole food crisis is because of the blockade and also the sanctions, I suppose. So India has been saying that there should be talks so that these things can be resolved. This is something which some diplomatic modus vivendi has to be found out, so that this war in Ukraine and the deleterious impact that it has on economies and the food situation and the societies of the world across can be reduced, can be stopped. And there again, India's insistence is on diplomacy and dialogue. That is the way we have been, and we've been willing to act also. We are like on humanitarian assistance. India is willing to offer humanitarian assistance. So in diverse ways, India has been constructive and at the same time very sensitive to what has been happening there. India has stood for respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity of UN members and a country and neighborhood. Yeah. About gender, what could be more exemplary than our new presidential candidate represents the weakest segment of women from a background and who comes to represent India and its rising strength. It is most exemplary that will have a president from the background that she comes from and the way she has pulled herself through her own efforts to be at that position. So it is only in democratic, egalitarian, pluralistic India that such miraculous rise can be shown. So these are strengths of India.
And gender equality, President Biden particularly will be extremely hard put to explain what the Supreme Court of the United States did in that Roe versus Wade and overturning a very basic right that happened yesterday. So, in terms of gender equality, I think India is actually very much on a par with the top of the world. As you rightly said, our presidential nominee is second to none. She represents everything that has been deprived for so many years, and she will, represent India rightly, as you said. But the most important thing that is likely to happen, we are running out of time. So what do you think will be the most important outcome, as it were, of this summit? What will be the message that goes out?
We are not participants in the summit as such. We have been invited as guests. Our Prime Minister will give his views, and which he has been articulating very well in the recent months, and he'll bring to the table what India can contribute to. But it is up to the G7 to decide what are the takeaways, because it is their summit. We have to go by what has been coming out. Like, for instance, there are stories about a new Marshall Plan for Ukraine's reconstruction. Then they are also thinking of helping Ukraine in every possible way, and also tightening further sanctions on Russia. It is their decision. They will do that. And it is the diplomacy of the G7 to strengthen their cohesion at this point, because they feel that what Russian aggression to Ukraine and Russia-China together, what they pose is a threat to this world order, which is based on rule of law, which is based on a plural system and democracy, and and market which are guided by law. So this is a challenge which actually strikes at the roots of the order which has been there for the last 75 years, ever since the end of the Second World War.
Sheila, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off there. We've run crazily out of time. Thank you so very much, and this discussion can be continued some other time. Thank you.
Thank you.
An Indian consignment worth 3 billion Sri Lankan rupees arrived at Colombo yesterday as part of the humanitarian assistance extended by India to the island nation. The consignment donated by the people of India consists of 14,700 metric tons of rice, 250 metric tons of milk powder and 38 metric tons of medicines. This is the second consignment under a larger commitment of 40,000 metric tons of rice, 500 metric tons of milk powder and medicines by Government of Tamil Nadu. Gopal Bagle, Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, and ministers from Sri Lanka government, Kehelia Ramukwela and Nalin Fernando, welcomed the consignment. India's economic, financial and humanitarian assistance to the people of Sri Lanka stands at over $3.5 billion in 2022. In addition to the 3 credit lines to the tune of more than $1.5 billion and forex support of around $2 billion, assistance from the government and people of India has taken the form of supply of medicines to several health-related establishments in various parts of Sri Lanka, distribution of kerosene among the fishermen, handing over of dry rations to needy sections, among others. Union Minister Dr. Jitendra Singh today left for Portugal to take part in the 2022 UN Ocean Conference at Lisbon starting from Monday. He will deliver the keynote address at the conference on the theme Scaling Up Ocean Action Based on Science and Innovation for the Implementation of Goal 14, Stock-Taking, Partnerships and Solutions. More than 130 countries will participate in the conference. In his departure statement, Dr. Singh said that under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India would be providing science and innovation-based solutions for the implementation of Goal 14 through partnerships. He said India has well-established collaboration and partnerships with UN agencies and research institutions for bridging the methodology and data gaps on SDG indicators. The minister said India is working towards the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development 2021 to 2030 for a clean, healthy, productive, predictive, safe and accessible ocean.
India sent the next shipment of 3,000 metric tons of wheat to Afghanistan today. External Affairs Ministry spokesman Arindam Bagchi said in a tweet that India's commitment to provide humanitarian assistance to the Afghan people remains steadfast. So far, India has successfully completed shipment of 33,500 metric tons of wheat to Afghanistan in partnership with World Food Programme. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned that the world is facing the real risk of multiple famines this year. In video message to the Uniting for Global Food Security Ministerial Conference in Berlin, he said 2023 could be even worse because of the growing shortage of food around the globe. UN Secretary-General said the war in Ukraine has added to the disruptions caused by climate change, the coronavirus pandemic and inequality to produce an unprecedented global hunger crisis already affecting hundreds of millions of people. Mr. Guterres said all harvests will be hit, including rice and corn, affecting billions of people across Asia, Africa and the Americas, and this year's food access issues could become next year's global food shortage. He warned that no country would be immune to the social and economic fallout. Mr. Guterres said UN negotiators are working on a deal that would enable Ukraine to export food and let Russia bring food and fertilizer to world markets without restrictions. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter @AIR News Alerts.
President Joe Biden today signed into law the first major federal gun safety legislation passed in decades, marking a significant bipartisan breakthrough on one of the most contentious policy issues in Washington. The legislation came together in the aftermath of recent mass shootings at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, and a Buffalo, New York supermarket that was in a predominantly black neighborhood. The House on Friday passed the bill by 234-193, including 14 Republicans voting with Democrats. The Senate passed the bill in a late-night vote on Thursday. The new law enhances background checks on young gun buyers between 18 and 21 years of age. After signing the bill at White House, Biden said that, God willing, it's going to save a lot of lives.
Their message to us was do something. I don't know how many times we heard that. Just do something. Well, today we did. While this bill doesn't do everything I want, it does include actions I've long called for that are going to save lives. It funds crisis intervention, including red flag laws. It keeps guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves and to others. It requires young people aged 18 to 21 to undergo enhanced background checks. It includes the first ever federal law that makes gun trafficking and straw purchases distinct federal crimes for the first time.
The U.S. Supreme Court has overturned a 50-year-old ruling that recognized a woman's constitutional right to an abortion. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 majority ruling, upheld a Republican-backed Mississippi law that bans abortion after 15 weeks. The judgment will transform abortion rights in America, with individual states now able to ban the procedure. Half of U.S. states are expected to introduce new restrictions or bans. 13 have already passed trigger laws to automatically outlaw abortion following the Supreme Court's ruling. President Joe Biden has slammed the U.S. Supreme Court for ending the right to abortion, accusing it of putting women's lives at risk in the name of an extreme ideology. In a White House speech, President Biden said it is a sad day for the court and the country, calling the decision cruel and saying it takes America back 150 years.
Pakistan has arrested a top Lashkar Taiba elite terrorist and the main handler of 2008 Mumbai attacks, Sajid Meer. The arrest comes years after authorities denying his presence in Pakistan and even claiming he was dead. Meer was wanted by both the US and India for over a decade. As many as 170 people of various nationalities, including 6 Americans, were killed in the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. Islamabad had kept denying Meer's presence in Pakistan to extricate itself from the Financial Action Task Force FATF International Terror Financing Watch List. The FATF has been keeping Pakistan on its grey list and used to monitor and isolate non-compliant countries. The International Maritime Organization IMO is celebrating the Seafarer Day today. It is celebrated on 25th of June each year to pay respect to seafarers and sailors who help the entire world function by conducting sea transport. The day was proposed by International Maritime Organization in 2010 to celebrate the contribution of the seafarer to the world economy and civil society. Day of the Seafarer recognizes the invaluable contribution of seafarers to the worldwide commerce and economic system.
The International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking will be observed tomorrow. The day was commemorated in 1989 after the UN General Assembly passed the resolution in 1987. The date, June 26, is to commemorate Lin Zexu's dismantling of the opium trade in Human, Guangdong, ending on June 25, 1839, just before the First Opium War in China. The theme for the year 2022 is addressing drug challenges in health and humanitarian crisis. The main aim of this day is to stop drug use and illicit drug trafficking to save lives. Live broadcast of all cricket matches of India's tour of West Indies in July 2022 will be available exclusively on DD Sports. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting said that DD Sports will broadcast all India West Indies matches on the July tour on all cable and DTH platforms apart from DD Free Dish. DD Sports will also air special shows based on pre-match and post-match analysis with experts and cricket celebrities.
Archers Jyoti Surekha Venom and Abhishek Verma won the gold medal in compound mixed team event at the World Cup Stage 3 in Paris today. Jyoti also clinched a silver in the individual event after a heartbreaking loss in the final to Great Britain's Ella Gibson in the shoot-off. In the compound mixed team final, the Indian duo beat France 152-149. Youth Affairs and Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has congratulated the Indian archer duo on clinching the gold medal in the mixed compound event. He said India's compound mixed duo Jyoti Surekha Verma and Abhishek Verma have claimed gold at Archery World Cup Stage 3 in France. In women's cricket, India defeated Sri Lanka by 5 wickets in the second T20 International at Dambulla. Chasing a victory target of 126 runs, the visitors scored 127 runs for 5 wickets in 19.1 overs. With the second consecutive win, the visitors have secured an unassailable lead in the 3-match series.
Now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Guardian reports Ecuador at standstill after 2 weeks of protests over cost of living crisis. The Washington Post writes, Ukraine accuses Russia of launching missiles from Belarusian airspace. The Globe and Mail reports, mummified baby woolly mammoth emerges from Yukon permafrost. New York Times writes, Norway mass shooting is being investigated as terrorism, police say. South China Morning Post reports, NATO poised to harden position on China as support for Russia deepens distrust. The Wall Street Journal reports, US and European economies slow sharply as recession risks grow. Financial Times writes Chinese banks lent Pakistan $2.3 billion to avert foreign exchange crisis.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on a 2-nation tour to Germany and UAE tomorrow. Mr. Modi says he is looking forward to meet leaders of some of the participating G7 and guest countries. US President Joe Biden signs the breakthrough gun safety legislation. India dispatches next shipment of 3,000 metric tons of wheat to Afghanistan today. In archery, Indian duo of Jyoti Surekha and Abhishek Verma win gold in World Cup Stage 3 mixed team event in Paris. And in women's cricket, India wins T20 series against Sri Lanka 2-0 in the 3-match series, beat Sri Lanka by 5 wickets in the second T20 International at Dambulla. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Mozambique on their Independence Day.
Vaishnav Jan do ime kahi de fir parari jane न करे
And with that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.